this is just me. This is just my opinion. They're not good movies at all. They were, culturally for teen and preteen girls at the time, an important part of the American zeitgeist. But I just used that word to try and sound smart, and I don't think that I was using it in the right way. The movies are not good. The movies from this soundtrack. But I've been listening to this theme all day, and you might recognize it. That's from Twilight. They're really terrible films. But that theme got me. And it's brought me to tears all day. I've just been crying constantly. But let me just share this with you. I feel like there's this well of tears. And it's just like every time I cry, it helps, but like it only took down the well that much. And it's all just caught right here. And I'm like, all the feels right now. I slapped myself in the face this morning. Not meaning to, it just sort of happened. I'll tell you how it happened. This arm was numb. It had gone to sleep. And I roll over and I kind of feel around for it with my other arm. And I'm kind of hitting it, trying to get it to wake up. I lift it. I kind of lift it like this. I wish you could see. Just picture like this dead body, basically. Not this dead body, this prone body laying in bed. One arm picks up the numb arm and is kind of shaking it. And I drop it. Oh, yeah, no, I lifted my arm and it just smacked me in my face. And it really hurt, actually. Like we've established, I am drawn to live in areas that are less than reputable. Because, like I mentioned before, it's generally what I can afford, and that's fine. And also, I'm comfortable. Most of the time, I really like my little places that I've lived in. I loved this apartment in New Orleans. It was my favorite apartment. I would have stayed there had this not happened. So, me and my roommate lived in this cute little 2-story townhome for a year, and I actually had just renewed for another year. The first fire was an accident. What happened was, it's 3:30 a.m., around that time. I'm woken up out of my sleep by this high-pitched beeping. It sounds like a fire alarm, and I think it's the fire alarm in my apartment. But it also sounds really kind of muffled. And I'm like realizing in my half sleep at 3:30 a.m. that it's coming through the wall. It's my neighbor's, not Miss Wanda's, other side, my neighbor's fire alarm. And my immediate thought at 3:30, laying in bed, is, son of a bitch didn't change the batteries. But let me just sniff. And if I smell smoke, maybe this is more than just the batteries need to be changed. So I did that. Kind of got up, sniffing around, 3 a.m. I smelled smoke. And I immediately jumped into, I am fully awake now. Called 911, talked with the operator. She got me patched over to the fire department and got him out there. Long story, not short. The first fire, they were able to get out there. It wasn't a big fire because it was an accident. What had happened was, what the firemen said anyways, was their was a little bit of food left on left on one of the stove eyes, and the stove was left on like just low, just a little bit, but is enough to make it burn and give off smoke. And yeah, word to the wise, really make sure your stove eye is off, not just on low. I mean, that seems silly to say, but a month goes by. Things have been kind of quiet next door. I didn't know. I thought maybe they had moved. 3:30 a.m. I'm awoken by this high-pitched beeping. And I remember my first thought this time was not again. I really did. That was the first thought. I was like, and not again, and also what are the odds? What I also heard, like right where my bedroom wall is shared with theirs, was what sounded like stumbling around. That will come into play later. But I did kind of what I did the first time. Again, I don't know what possessed me each of these times, but I just started sniffing. And this time I immediately smelled smoke, and it was stronger than the first fire. As I'm on the phone with the dispatcher each time, I am packing a backpack filled with things that I love. Multitasking, okay? I'm on the phone with the dispatcher, packing my backpack of valuables, and saying, here we go. I walked out of my apartment door in my PJs, the little flip-flops on, and wearing this little backpack, and clutching it, actually, and not knowing if I was ever going to get back in. The firemen had to break down the door to my neighbor's apartment. And it wasn't like a huge fireball that came out, but it was one of those things where this fire was much more intense than the previous one. Long story not short, the firemen were able to contain the fire. Thank you. So if you've ever been in a fire, so first of all, we love firemen, right? We're so thankful for them and what they do. And if you've ever been in a fire, you understand what I'm about to say, where there's a whole new appreciation. Miss Wanda was really, really savvy, and she immediately caught on to. She said something ain't right about this, and she pulled one of the firemen aside, like once they'd gotten it contained, and she was like, "What's going on?" And I didn't realize until this happened in my life that when at the scene, the firemen can't use the word arson. It's not okay to say that. Because an investigation hasn't been done yet. He's like, here's what we found. Here's what we saw when we got in there. There had been a fire lit on both floors. This was a 2-story townhome, mind you, and there was a fire lit on both floors. Upstairs, there was trash that had been lit in like a trash can, and it was just kind of going, I guess. But the real bad one was there were clothes in the oven, and the oven was turned on. So again, at the scene, a fireman can't use the word arson, but he kind of looked at us and he was like, there were clothes in the oven. And now the landlord starts making his way to see what's happened, and we find out that the party that had been living next door had just been evicted that day. He came back and was pissed that he'd been evicted, and set fire to the unit. And the stumbling around that I heard, if you remember that, amongst the high-pitched beeping, the stumbling around that I heard the second time was him running from the upstairs to get downstairs after he'd set the second fire. I honestly think it was just like this gut thing. Like, I don't think he was considering the fact that he could have hurt people, you know? Like, it was more like I'm pissed off, you know? Let me show you. Different fireman, singular, told us that it's good that they got there when they did, because had they gotten there even a minute and a half later, the fire would have caught the air conditioning unit and there would have been an explosion. Places where Anna has lived. Ultimately, no one was hurt. Um, Everyone was okay. Oh, and I moved within 2 weeks. That was the fastest move ever, for good measure.